over to Denise.
I'm learning quickly to shift because I had a speaker that canceled on me already, so hoping the year doesn't go like that, but thankfully, John and Debbie were really willing to jump in and talk about the Municipal Emergency Services Authority. They did not send me a bio, so I'm just gonna tell you
Make
what
stuff up.
I know. I've gotten to know John since starting at the chamber. He was the president, I knew him before that, but that's when I really got to know him, because he was the president of the chamber and my boss. So he was a great support to me that first year. He is now still on the board, but no longer the president, because he's in line to be president here, but I'm really thankful for the support that he's given me, great guy. Debbie, I think I got to know really well planning her installation and her becoming queen, and so she has just been an amazing example to me and who I want to be when I grow up. So we have some quality people here in our Rotary Club, quality people in Elizabethtown. I am thrilled to know them, so thank you.
All right, so the Municipal Emergency Services Authority, and John pinch hitted, I think last year when we had a cancellation when we were out at the Masonic Village. It was pretty high-end planning stages for Mesa, and we're coming down to the wire here. So we wanted to give you an update as to what is going on. There is a public fee hearing to be held on September 28th out at EVIC. We were looking at doing it at the end of August, but we've had some changes here just this week, which will change things. Mesa was established back in February, when it became actually approved by the state of Pennsylvania. And so the public fee hearing is just that, based on the fee, not if Mesa should exist. Mesa exists, and the hearing is strictly on the fees.
And just FYI, the Articles of Incorporation were approved by the Department of State in less than 24 hours, which kind of blew us all away. We expected to wait weeks to hear, but the state is kind of watching what's happening with EMS, and I think they were interested in this moving forward.
And I think the state also understands that there is a crisis in EMS across the state of Pennsylvania, or the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. So what is it? So it's municipal-led emergency services authority. It's an administrative authority. All the participating municipalities hold one seat on the authority. So for Mountjoy Township, I am that representative, and I am actually the chair of Mesa. John is an integral part of Mesa. He does not sit on the board. For West Sunnyvale is Roger Snyder, and for E-Town Borough is Mark Hershey, who is actually the treasurer as well. So it was created to fund, manage, and provide emergency services to the member municipalities. And like we said, that was done in February, and we're looking for a local solution to the EMS authority. So what crisis? Soaring cost, low funding or low reimbursement from insurance companies, staffing challenges, all have led to a crisis across Pennsylvania. Scott Kingsborough, whom you all know, is the director of Northwest EMS now. He is also, who would call him? He's our
Transition
manager right now as well. He sends out updates from the Ambulance Association of Pennsylvania. I think they come out like weekly, and there is not a week that goes by that there is not an EMS company in the Commonwealth that's closing, that's not closing. So there is multiple closing all the time. In fact, July 1st, Londonderry closed their EMS. So we talk about local examples for Northwest EMS. Northwest EMS is widely known, and as John, or somebody put in there, They were the EMS Agency of the Year in the Commonwealth in 2020 for their outstanding service. But they were facing insolvency. Everybody who owns a property receives a member request from them, and only about half of the residents, actually a little less than half of the residents, contribute through subscriptions. The increasing costs for equipment, fuel, training, benefits was far exceeding the contributions that Northwest EMS was receiving. And then the insurance reimbursements. So that gap, like it says on there, is about $4 million annually. So they would have become insolvent, I think it was like 3 or 4 years, if they kept going the way they were going. Just to give you an idea, an average ambulance call runs between $750 and $1,100. There's a shortfall of at least 50%, maybe even a little more for each call. Scott was telling me one time there is a certain needle that you use for a certain procedure, and that needle is something like $700 and some dollars just for the needle, and Medicaid reimbursed $3. Okay, so now you can see where this is in dire need of funding. So, bold cooperative solution. So all municipalities are required to provide EMS services in their municipality. We're not required to pay for it, we just have to make sure it's there. However, you get what you pay for. So a committee was formed in 2021, and that was after probably about 3 to 4 years of quarterly meetings with Northwest EMS, talking about how to shorten that gap between the funding and the cost. It went out to the municipalities with a request for additional funding, contributions from the municipalities, and it was all voluntary. Some municipalities stepped up to the plate immediately, and I'll give you the Mountjoy Township example. I think we were doing somewhere in the neighborhood of 16,000 or something a year, and the request from us was for 50,000. So we immediately took it up to 50,000. But there were comparable municipalities in the Northwest EMS region who were paying 3,000, who were paying 0. So when we talk about Rotary, being fair to all concerned, it was not fair to all concerned. We were supplementing for those other municipalities. So in 2021, when it was formed, or the meeting started talking about how can we fix this, it was between a COG, which is Council of Governments, or an authority, and attorneys were involved, so forth, and we came down to the authority phase. John was involved in all of those meetings at that point. So we had several public meetings over several months, and then the 8 municipalities incorporated in February to join MESA. Monday night, Penn Township withdrew from MESA. They have decided to go with Lifeline, and we can talk about that later. They were on the fence as to whether to join, and they did, and now they just withdrew. So they have to find their own provider. So the municipalities are listed there. So it's pretty much all the northwest corner plus Elizabeth Township, which is just west of Clay, north, or the Brickerville area. Yeah, 501, 322, right up there. So that is what we have now. So again, MESA is a representative from each of the municipalities. So what will happen is if a municipality had joined the authority, everyone, or the properties would be billed in those those municipalities, and we'll talk about that. If a municipality did not join and they have to find their own, something happens later and they would like to join the authority, we haven't figured out how that's gonna work yet. There'll probably be some sort of fee to join because we've just done all the work. And then we would start covering those areas as well.
They could also, the other thing that we're looking at is a municipality could potentially contract with the authority, not necessarily join the authority, but contract with the authority to have the service provided. And in that scenario, instead of the property owners within the municipality paying to Mesa, the municipality itself would pay and then supposedly raise their property taxes to try and pull that in.
Yes,
Are we saving questions to the end?
no, you can go.
So why a property owner fee instead of like a resident fee?
Well, we'll cover that. We'll cover that because we were looking at what type of model to use and that'll answer that question. I think.
And then the other question, I guess, is when it's actually used, is there some sort of charge to the user?
We'll cover that too. Okay.
I should have saved the questions to the end.
That's all right. So when we're talking about sustainable funding, it's everybody, or, Glenn will pay his fee every year, so it is sustainable. The Mesa, for Mesa, for the authority, we have a heavier hand, or a heavier hammer that we can use than a nonprofit in the form of Northwest EMS. So can we lien on property? Yes. Northwest? No, we could not. Hopefully, everybody will say, yes, this is an excellent idea, and here's my check. So, one of the issues with the shortfall is that we're also paying for a readiness to answer the call. That's not paid by insurance. So if an ambulance is sitting there waiting, you don't schedule your heart attacks. You don't schedule your chainsaw accident. You don't schedule your fall. At a doctor's office, they throw 5 of you in 10 minutes, but they're every, 2 minutes is covered. With an ambulance, it is not, but we still have to pay for the building. We still have to pay the salaries of the people waiting there to go out on the call. So the largest shortfall is because of that readiness for service, so that they are available. So the fee revenue will provide the funds to cover that readiness and the services. So with Mesa, they are public meetings. We are not private. We are not a nonprofit. So it is public meetings. They are held on the first and third Wednesday of the month at 7 o'clock at the Eton Borough Hall. Everybody is welcome to attend. There's public comment. So doing it as the authority and each municipality having a voice, you elect those public officials who serve on that, and you can voice any concern at a Mesa meeting. So will they replace Northwest EMS? Yes. Mesa will be the new entity for the emergency services to the municipalities, but the same people will be there. So the same staff. Scott Kingsborough will still be there. They'll just have a different logo, different names on the buses. So it's the same people. So, method of assessment of charges. So we established a budget in conjunction, it says the local CPA, it was Phil Rudy, who does the auditing work for Northwest EMS, and Bill Presenica, who is the treasurer for Northwest EMS. So based on the historical data, they created a budget for Mesa. And from that, they included the projected reimbursements from insurance, fees to be collected from the property owners, businesses, organizations that are in the Mesa service area. So we wanted the fee to be defensible and to be pretty rock solid in how we did those calculations.
And fair to all concerned.
And fair to all concerned. We did enlist the help of Bob Dolan. He came out of retirement to help us with this as well. So between actually Bob Dolan, John, and Mark Easter from Penn Township, we came up with a model that we thought was fair, again. So they looked at the call volume from Northwest EMS, and they looked at the percentage of calls, those calls that went to certain occupancy classifications. Occupancy classifications. No, go back.
Go back?
Yeah. No, just explain what
Okay,
they
so,
are. The account, the architect.
so, we looked at all those calls, and I got to know each township really well, in looking at addresses. But what we were trying to determine was, where do calls go? How are calls classified? What we came up with was, and we'll get to it in the next chart, there's a percentage that goes to what we call a standard dwelling unit. So, whether it's a townhome or a duplex or a detached private home or an apartment, there's a percentage of those calls go to that kind of location. There's a percentage of calls that go to retirement facilities, particularly assisted living and acute nursing. There's a percentage of calls that go to normal business addresses, you know, goes to the Turkey Hill or goes to the Ocean State Job Lot or wherever to pick up somebody. There's a percentage of calls that happen on the roadway. It's an accident. It doesn't happen at anybody's particular house, but it happens on the public roadway somewhere. There's a percentage of calls that go to educational facilities, college or primary. There's a percentage that goes to an event venue like the Star Barn or Ironstone Ranch or any of those other places. So we looked at all those calls and we classified all of them as to where they go, and from that we were able to develop a percentage of, okay, we think that the standard dwelling unit needs to carry X amount of the load because it produces X amount of the calls, and that's how we got down to deciding, okay, how are we gonna build this out? Can I go to the next one now?
Hold on. So they grabbed all this data from the county, from the tax parcels, and from the municipalities. So everybody in all these municipalities are working on this because it needs to be the same for Mountjoy Township as it is for West Donegal Township, as it is for Kenoi Township. So,
Don't blame me for Kenoi.
I just know you live there.
I just live there.
So it needed to be, like I said, defensible. So, yes, go ahead.
Okay,
So this chart is not, this was approved at our meeting last week.
Yeah.
However, Penn Township has withdrawn, so these numbers will change.
right.
So, go ahead, John.
Okay, so up here you see on this column here are the occupancy classifications, and we have it broken down into a number of basic ones. So you have residential occupancies, commercial business, institutional, educational, public assembly, and special municipal road. So our goal, or the amount of money we're trying to produce with the fee, is around $2.75 million.
Here it is.
And it's 2.84 there because what we know from property tax data and from other types of fees is you only really get about 97% of what you bill. 3 to 4% of what you bill you will never get, or you will have to chase all over the place. So to get to 2.75, we're going to try and produce about 2.85 million in fee so that we make sure we get what we need, accounting for that 3% loss. So, for instance, standard dwelling unit, like I said, single duplex town apartments, and I have ILU here. That means independent living. So, an apartment on Masonics campus or a cottage on Masonics campus is considered a standard dwelling unit. Okay, so 73.5% of the calls go to a standard dwelling unit. 73% of our target here is $2.1 million. There are, based on parcel data, just shy of 25,000 standard dwelling units, do the math, $85 a unit. So, part of answering your question, Jeff, is it goes to property owners, yes, but if I'm an apartment building owner and I have 5 units in my apartment building, I'm gonna be billed for 5 standard dwelling units. Then that landlord is gonna either pay that himself or herself, or pass it off to their tenant.
Do all property owners pay property tax though? Aren't there certain exemptions?
This-
But
That
this is not a
is-
tax, this is a fee.
This
So-
is a fee.
Ah.
So this,
So there wouldn't be any exemptions?
No.
so
there's
the
no
Masonic,
exemptions.
I
who
see.
does not pay taxes, does pay the fee,
Would pay the fee.
would pay the fee, yes.
And this is annual?
This is an annual fee.
And if you were a member, if you paid the membership for Northwest EMS,
$100.
it's for a family. And actually, I think it's like 85, something like that, you probably just round up. So it's really gonna be very close to what you would be paying now if you were a member, unless you fall into these other classifications.
Okay. So we did standard dwelling unit, assisted living. Now, within the service area, there are approximately 350 assisted living beds that need to be covered. Well, assisted living calls are 6%, over 6% of the calls. It's a very high call volume per unit. So that's a $500 charge for an assisted living bed to get ambulance coverage. But that's, again, this is based on usage. We're trying to look at this. This is based on call usage and compared to number of units that exist, and that's how we determine what the fees are. That's what we thought was the fairest way. Commercial businesses. So what we were looking for is FTEs, or full-time equivalent. How many staff do you have? Given that almost 8.9% of calls go to commercial businesses, that's about an $8 per employee charge.
Yeah, how do you determine an FTE? Because like the Amazon warehouse, they're all contractors, right?
Well, no, not, they do actually, we use LST data, local services tax. And whether they're a contractor or not, they're paying local services tax at that location, and so we're able to look at LST and determine what the, now, when we get down to the final, this is the fee model to determine how we're gonna do this. When we get down to it, this number's probably gonna modify a little bit as we comb through and finalize some of these things, but that's basically how we establish FTE.
And if, let's say the LST says there's 5 people and the bill's 40, they can say, well, we don't have 5 people, we have 7, we have 3. And so they can,
There'll be an appeals process
Appeal,
through the
yeah.
billing cycle, just like you have an appeals process for property tax, there'll be an appeals process. If we build Nordstrom for 2,000 employees and they said, oh, we really only have 1,750, well then, we would go through the process, okay, vet that, determine, prove that that's the case, and then we'll go on from there.
and you think that, if they're employed, that really there wouldn't be that many calls, but Nordstrom, when John mentioned that, Northwest EMS goes a lot to Nordstrom because somebody is sick and wants to go home. Right? They may not transport, but they still go. And Northwest EMS only gets paid if somebody's transported.
They burn the diesel to get there, they use whatever supplies they needed while they were there, they don't transport, there's no insurance reimbursement.
No insurance reimbursement.
Can't you just throw them in a truck and take them somewhere?
In the back of the pickup.
Some quarters
Yeah.
somewhere.
So that is why the employees are in there. So let me get, Mark Hershey, he and I were just talking about this. So they've had Harvest View Barn, so they have the event venue, and you'll see that down here then. They'll pay based upon occupancy. They'll pay because he has employees on the farm, and they also have a rental unit. So he should see 3 lines on his bill. And he's happy to pay.
That's once that's.
Once a year.
That's a yearly bill.
Yep. And we'll talk about that more then. Go ahead.
So then we'll just work our way down through here. We have acute nursing beds. There's about 462 of them within the coverage area. they're just shy of 5% of calls, do the math. We took K through 12 education and rolled it up into residential occupancies because virtually all the students that are in those K through 12 facilities within the coverage area are also living within the coverage area. So their parents are already paying the occupants or the dwelling unit fee. It didn't seem right to tag the school district again with that. But we do have residential college students and staff. We have one college, we have E-Town College. They do account for almost 1% of the calls, believe it or not. So they have a per resident, student, and staff fee, $15 to get that coverage in. Event venue, there's almost 2,000 occupancy units of event venue within the coverage area. And when you think about Star Barn and Ironstone Ranch and Moonstone Manor and Harvest View Barn and Melhorn Manor, there's a whole series of them. Whoops, they're not that high a percentage of the call volume, but they still generate some. So there's a $5 fee. So for instance, Stone Gables will pay $5 per occupancy for each of their. So I think
We mean per occupancy.
so. The Star Barn has an occupancy of like 350 people.
Okay.
So that's what I mean by occupancy. So you can put 350 people in there for an event, that's their occupancy level.
We removed churches from this
Yeah.
because we figure the people attending the church are already
Oh, we see.
in the area.
The church will still get a bill for their staff that work there,
Okay.
but they won't get a seat per seat.
You always used to see an ambulance at a football game too.
We would still, and that is one of the things with going with the Mesa. If we went with Lifeline or Lemsa or Fast out of the county of Harrisburg,
Yeah.
I don't know. They don't necessarily do standbys like that. So we will still have the community events, the CPR events, the standbys at the ball games, so forth.
But they're not contracted, they're standby there, so they get a call, they leave,
Exactly.
Yes.
which is
Yeah.
the way it should be.
Right.
Yeah, right.
But I believe with Northwest EMS, in the past, that they account for that. They account for being here and possibly a call over here.
And the last item here is, this is auto, like I said, auto accidents. Over 5% of the calls are auto accidents. So the metric we used here is miles of roadway. So within the municipal coverage area, there is almost 500 miles of roadway. That's state and local roads. So do the math. So each municipality is gonna pay $295 per mile for their roadways to cover all those things that happen on the roadways that are not a person's, being in a person's home. So
We will not be billing the state. So that will be absorbed by the township, by the municipalities. But I know for Mountjoy Township, our 50,000 will go down. So the municipal contributions will go away, but replaced by the miles of roadway. And we have a lot because we have 283. And the 283, 743 interchange, or Cloverleaf Road interchange, that nobody knows how to drive on. So we have a lot over there.
You had a question?
Maybe getting ahead, but what if I call the ambulance and I get transported, will I then also be billed?
That's the next slide.
We're getting there.
Question the roadways, you talk about Mountjoy Township and the townships compared to the borough. If you look at, is this alley included in that number of miles?
Yep.
Was the
We
road-
use the PennDOT approved municipal roadway map to generate that number. Every year, PennDOT publishes a map for every municipality that details all the roadways that are public roadways within that municipality. And those are the numbers we use to arrive at this.
Was there any consideration, or is there any consideration given to, is there a difference in the number of accidents you have in the borough, or Marietta Borough, compared to what you have in the townships?
We didn't go that granular.
Okay.
Well, I think the other thing is, for example, Marietta Borough, how many miles do they have? Like 1.5? No, I'm kidding. Yeah.
Not many.
So they're not paying
Yeah, but I'm
much.
look at E-Town Borough and all the, you know, the highest speed limit in E-Town Borough is 35 miles an hour.
They have a fairly high crash ratio.
Is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because you have intersections,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
intersections. So
If
the
they
borough
were,
has,
if they were all roundabouts.
yeah, no. The borough has about 10.5 miles. The borough has about 10.5 miles of roadway.
Okay.
Okay. Not, West Donegal has 60 miles.
I was gonna say 65, yeah.
And we have more miles of roadway, but we probably have less crashes.
So I think it was 56 or something.
Something like that. There was another hand back here.
Well, it was sort of the same thing, like some townships definitely have more crashes than others without regard to the roadway.
Yeah.
You know, whatever 743, I've been behind 3 crashes just on
Yeah.
that road.
The delta here, I think, would be so small that to do the extra time to do that analysis probably wouldn't, it might move the needle a little bit in one way or the other.
Yeah, I mean, every year, like, the dumb drivers might just move to Marietta.
Yeah.
So-
Does anybody else have any questions on how we arrived at the fee?
Clark,
You pay for the standard dwelling unit. And if I'm employed in the borough or an employer in the borough, I gotta pay for myself again and my employees.
Yes.
Even though they're residents of the borough or one of the surrounding villages.
yes, primarily because it's another location.
But that applies to the churches and schools, which you've exempted.
Yeah,
But the percentage of people employed in the borough that live in one of the participating municipalities, we're not gonna get that granular.
I think the schools will probably still get a bill for employees. They're not gonna
Yes.
get a bill for students, with the exception of the college, which has resident students who live on campus. That was the rationale there.
They,
How do you go about assessing Masonic Village since it's somewhat of a big player in this whole thing?
Masonic, every property out there in Masonic Village is owned by Masonic. So the Masonic would get the bill, and then and it would be divvied out, you know, by line item as to what classification, and then they would need to pass that on to the
Yeah,
residents.
We'll cover that.
And that's gonna be in lieu of what they probably give to Northwest EMS now.
Let me tell you, Masonic gives very little to
Okay.
Northwest CMS right now,
Nowhere.
nowhere near.
Masonic Village is 67% of the call volume in West Donegal Township. West Donegal Township is the second highest call volume for one of the lowest populations. With 67% of our call volume within West Donegal Township comes out of Masonic Village. So,
And that-
the fee is going where the calls are generated from.
And if you do the math, and let me, I don't know exactly, John might know off the top of his head what the Masonic bill would look like using this model. Remember, this will change, not could change, it will change because of Penn Township leaving. To staff one ambulance, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, with a beginning EMT at $19 an hour, just the wages is almost $340,000. So if you want a paramedic or you want ALS, you're looking at probably double that. So probably $750,000 to keep them staffed for 1 year, and that's just one truck. That doesn't include the equipment, the supplies, the buildings, nothing. So for Masonic to put their own ambulance on staff, this will be a bargain.
It's somewhere between $200,000 and $300,000 a year. But that's the level of service they're getting currently with call volume.
Right, and remember, our goal here is, remember I said Northwest EMS was ambulance of the year in 2020 in the Commonwealth. We do not want to diminish any level of service that is currently being provided. I forget what the average time from the time they leave the garage to on site. I think it's something like 7 minutes.
It's somewhere between 5 and 7 minutes is their average response time.
And we'll talk more about that. Dustin, you had another question?
Yeah, as this is now going to essentially be a government entity, I know, we talked about Masonic, a lot of those people in their gratitude donate large sums of money enough to buy a truck or whatever. Is that still, kind of thing still gonna be able to happen now that it's government?
This is still in the works. The attorney for Mesa and the attorney for Northwest EMS are working on that to create a foundation for Northwest EMS because there are a lot of bequests in the wills and money is left. And how that relationship would be, we're not exactly sure. It could just be for capital, to buy a bus, to buy equipment. We haven't gotten there yet. We need to get past the fee hearing, and then at the same time, every employee has to reapply because it's a new entity. We have policy manuals, we have personnel manuals, we have all sorts of stuff that are on that list, which Scott, just to get Medicare and Medicaid, it's like 6 months. And you have to get the one, then you have to get the other. So we do have a timeline for things to be done, but that is one thing that we will be looking at. We're gonna go just to the end here because I think we might answer some of the questions and then we'll open it back up so we can make sure we get through these. So what will you receive? Remember what I talked about, the readiness to answer the call. We wanna keep that 5 to 7 minutes, unless you live out where I live and just drive fast, you'll make it. No residual bills for EMS services if the insurance pays towards an ambulance bill. So if you would normally get an $1,100 bill and your fee is paid for, not if, your fee will be paid towards Mesa, you will not get the residual bill unless you have a deductible, and that's where the next one. 50% off the ambulance bill if you have no insurance or the entire bill goes to the insurance deductible. That is the same as what you get now with the membership with Northwest EMS. So
One
I
of the things
talked,
we wanted to do was to make sure that the level of benefit that you received as a subscriber to Northwest continued to exist as a fee-paying resident who is covered by Mesa.
and I hate the word authority because it sounds very authoritarian, exactly. But it's representatives of each of these municipalities that the people elect. I want to give you an example. I said that Penn Township pulled out. Lifeline came in. There's a war between LGH and Lifeline, Penn State at this point, because Penn State built that wonderful hospital down there. So they want to put people in their beds. So they're required by law to take the person where they want to go, as long as it's reasonable. If you want to go to Sunbury, you're out of luck, all right? But the goal is to get people in their beds. They came in with a per capita for the municipality of $5 a head. So that would be a bill for E-Town of about $50,000. However, these don't apply unless you buy a membership, which costs more than the fee you would pay for a single family unit. So a single dwelling unit plus the $5 sexy per capita fee comes out to, it was like $105.
$5, I think, is only for the first 2 years.
Yeah.
First,
Then it goes down.
then it goes to 7, right? And then Lemsa came in with $2 because that's LGH. But you don't get this. And they're putting one truck between Raffo, Manheim, and Penn Townships. Raffo Township, Penn Township, Manheim Borough. So that 5 to 7 minute is not gonna happen. So, next one. So why have to pay the annual fee if I have insurance? Yes. And again, we talked about readiness of service. We want people on staff and ready to jump in that seat and out the door. Insurance reimbursements, I talked about that needle. That was a pretty significant difference there. But it covers less than 40% of the cost of service for insurance reimbursement, particularly Medicare and Medicaid. Cindy can probably attest to that as well, being out there in Maytown. So fees will fund the balance of operational expenses, ensuring readiness to answer calls, and fiscal stability. We are not building up the coffers. However, with the authority, if we want to move the fees in excess of 10%, we have 5%.
5%.
Is it 5%? 5%.
It's CPI or up to 5%. If it's greater than that, then it has to be.
Then it has to be a public hearing to approve it. We can move it less than that each year. But the goal is to get this as close as possible to make sure EMS is funded. We're not going broke. I don't wanna pay for it, but I do wanna pay for it, particularly when I want them there. For example, Mountjoy Township, we initiated the fire tax, I don't know, 6, 7 years ago. We had 2 phone calls.
2015.
It's okay,
Same
8 years ago. And I think it's because we all know we want them there. We don't want them out doing chicken barbecues, which they still do because this still doesn't fund them. And we know that a ladder truck costs $2 million. People didn't complain, so we're hoping that people realize the service that will be maintained here. So Mesa will continue to provide the EMS services, and we plan to begin operations in 2024. So we were shooting for January 1, but with the move from Penn Township this week, it could be February, it could be the end of first quarter. So now questions.
Oh, and another wonderful QR code.
There you go, oh yeah. And this is a terrible website address. But to create a .gov address is almost an act of God.
Yeah.
We finally got it after 4 months because government actually has to approve it. And they had to talk to me, but I couldn't call them. They had to call some place to verify that the number that they were calling was mine and it would actually be me. So I said, okay, call the borough, ask for Rebecca, she will confirm. So they hung up from me, called Rebecca, verified my phone number, and then called me back. Oh my gosh, it is crazy.
Nancy.
So, I had 3 questions. Can you turn back to the slide with the troops or whatever? So, as a standard dwelling owner, I used to pay for 1 person in my house, well, my wife is 2. So will that be a standard fee no matter how many people you have in
Yes.
the house?
Correct. We do not want to be a census every year.
Okay.
Sending you a bill and say, hey, fill this out and pay this much per person.
Second of all, I think you had said that Masonic Village, the cottages are under that standard dwelling. So Masonic Village will not be given that.
No, they will.
Oh,
They
they
will. They own it. So they're
Okay.
gonna get that $80, $5 bill per cottage, or they're gonna get that $85 bill per apartment unit. But it'll be directed to Masonic Village because they own the property.
Okay, and same thing with assisted living, every patient that's in assisted living would be paying $500
That's up to Masonic.
a year,
That's up to Masonic.
or wherever they are at assisted living.
It goes to the
Right.
property owner.
Goes to the property owner and however Masonic wants to divvy it out. You know, when they're doing, what, 7, 8, 9 grand a
Yeah.
month for some people.
Yeah.
Are you gonna be requesting the payments, all at once or quarterly, or how will that work?
I would imagine we're gonna,
We haven't talked about.
we haven't talked about that because we're still trying to nail down a vendor to do the billing. We're talking with a couple of vendors who might be able to handle the billing for us. I would imagine it might be a hybrid for an individual property, like standard dwelling unit, it's a one-time bill. But for somebody like your facility,
Paramount.
for somebody like Paramount or Masonic or Nordstrom, there might be a quarterly option.
And how do you assess how many residents are in in our particular building, how do you know the number?
You would be contacted for that. I mean,
You're not at that
East,
point yet.
we're not at that point. I mean,
Right.
East Donegal gave me an estimate of how many they think are in your facility.
Right.
East Donegal would know.
Right.
And I got that data from East Donegal. So I got data from all the various municipalities.
There's this number that says if everybody is sharing, if there's 2 per room,
Right.
this is the number.
Right.
But in actuality, this is the number.
Yes.
So will you
This
find
is the
that?
this is the fee model, this is not the billing model,
Gotcha,
okay?
Gotcha.
So you understand the distinction I'm making there?
yeah,
And this is gonna be pretty much like a point in time. So
right, of
July
course.
1, somebody else comes in.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
no, I get that. So I am hearing all this information, how is it like, I don't get the mail, how is some
Okay.
of this stuff
The public
communicated so
fee,
that?
the public fee hearing
Uh-huh.
is, we are required to notify all property owners in writing at least 30 days in advance. That's, how many postcards?
About
40?
34,000
About 34,000.
that are gonna go out.
Yes. So for the hearing on September 28th,
28th.
we'll have to have that out probably the
Send it.
second to last week of August. And then the public fee hearing will be at EBIC. People can ask there. You can go to your municipality. Every one of these municipalities has somebody sitting on the authority board. Dave?
We have an example of the ideal where a plan works, like you're looking for.
This is the
Okay,
first one.
this
No.
is the first fee-based authority in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania.
For
We-
EMS.
For EMS. Yes, you have water authorities, sewer authorities. We have received calls, well, let me back up. We received funds from Hickornell and Almond, I think that was 25,000.
Yeah.
When we were first starting this. Lancaster County gave us ARPA funds of 375,000 to cover our costs till we get up and running. The state of Pennsylvania wants this to work. We have gotten calls from Erie County, Allegheny County, the state of Washington, multiple. This is not just a problem in Lancaster County. This is the entire state. There are EMS groups in the northern tier that are traveling an hour and a half to pick up somebody because there's no ambulance. Now, here's the other caveat. So we have the 7 municipalities, which we will operate within. If Lifeline does not have an ambulance available to cover a call in Mountjoy Borough, guess who gets called? Northwest EMS. Lifeline currently covers Mountjoy Borough. Northwest EMS has covered over 20% of their calls last year. So it's called mutual aid, and they're required to go. If the county sends them, they have to go. So your memberships here, we're supplementing calls to Mountjoy Borough. So what we are anticipating doing is to notify those boroughs and municipalities that if we are going to cover mutual aid calls, it's gonna be X dollars per call, maybe $300, just for example, per call. And we will go pick them up.
But it won't be if we cover it, it's when.
When we cover.
Just as an example, last year, 2022, Northwest EMS covered in mutual aid 1,400 calls. That means Northwest EMS went outside their coverage area to do mutual support 1,400 times. Northwest was covered 250 times. So that-
And a
that
lot of
gives you-
those were probably because
Because
we were
we were out
covering
somewhere else.
somebody else. So our intent is to build that municipality. You know, you're required to provide EMS services, and if they're not doing it and we have to do it, you're gonna pay for it. I know
Thank
this
you
is
for your
a
work.
lot. So if you guys have any questions, you're more than welcome. John and I,
We'll be here.
we've lived and breathed this for quite a while now. And I'm gonna also say again, I have an 1864 atlas up here if anybody wanted to look at it before I take it, of Lancaster County.
That's gonna be a long, public meeting in September, if this is any indication.
You know what, we've had public hearings and we've had
We had 200 people at our first public hearing, and I think we had
Five,
five
six?
people who would have spoken opposition, with the rest speaking in support.
Right.
And again, the authority exists now. It's not, that's not a set item for debate. It's how's the fee structured? That's the next item for debate.
All right. Very interesting, very valuable. Thanks so much. That's it.
Good job.
Make that.
We'll go through today,
I take the stitches on next Friday, I'm ready to back.
Well, you wouldn't wanna go this week anyway.
See ya.
I shot 77 with him. Sunset. And I stuck two in the crap on number 2, there's that big red, stuck one in, had to drop and take the penalty, and I did it on the second par 5, the back-to-backs. So I had 2 less strokes. But then the next day I played Hershey West and shot 91. Well, yeah, I don't know, totally different game. Totally different day and a totally different.
Because you know what's gonna happen, as soon as high end starts dropping, your high end start cutting.
Hey man, I hope you're good. Everything's, so you're just living the dream there, and they cleared you. They're calling me, man, my doctor wants me now, done now, and they're putting me out for Hershey endoscopy. Hershey endoscopy is not endoscopy. They work there, but they don't own it. The endoscopy's over at Bradford, you know where I'm at? And you don't, and so I called, I said, man, my doctor wants me in the meeting. She says, every doctor wants that. I said, okay, then you tell my doctor. So I called Dr. Ren and said, hey, I can't do what I can't do.
Oh, sure.
Is that right? Are you gonna feel like your voice will come a little stronger? I mean, please don't take that. I don't know. And you don't know. They didn't say it. They didn't even say it's fine, you may.
But you have 2 big cycle groups fighting each other. You're the pawn. As soon as it gets
I'm surprised they didn't. Seriously, not gonna play that bitch.
I know why. Yeah, you know why. I will.
Yeah.
Tell me, yes,